Yep, welcome everyone to the August user group for Marketing Cloud Account Engagement that we affectionately know as Pardot. This month we're covering scoring and grading, a little bit about what it is and how to use it. Just go through some housekeeping type stuff. So this is a combined user group between both the Melbourne group and the Sydney group. Our group leaders in Melbourne are Tammy, who's on the call. In fact, everyone's on the call today. So Tammy, Kat, Claudia, and myself. I'm Andy. And our Sydney marketer group leaders are Anu and Chris. Chris is on the call. I'm not sure if Anu's here with us, but Chris is new to being one of the group leaders, and I think actually in Sydney they are looking for an additional group leader. If anyone's interested, reach out to Anu or Chris anytime and volunteer your time if you're interested. So the whole point of our marketers user group is it's really a forum for people to discuss how they use account engagement, learn about the release notes, what's new, what's coming up, networking to meet other people that may be experiencing the same highs and lows with their product, help find solutions and problem solve together, and hopefully present to you some like real life case studies from other people, ways that they're using Pardot, ways they've solved particular problems and that sort of stuff. So it's just really, and we try to be pretty informal, just get together and talk about this great platform. I will be sharing this presentation after the meeting today, so there's links here for all the sort of Pardot related things like the new features blog posts, release notes, the Trailblazer community. There's an ideas exchange, which is where you go and tell Salesforce your great ideas for what Pardot should do, and you can also vote on other people's ideas to get new features put into the product, which is a really useful way to have your voice heard actually, and in how the product's developed over time. And then there's also the link to the vidyard where there's lots of Pardot videos teaching you how to do particular things. So today's speakers will be me. I'm Andy Morton. I work at Media Monks as a marketing automation specialist. Tammy's also going to present a case study, also from Media Monks, and Chris is making her debut performance, and she's also from Media Monks, and she'll be taking us through the release notes for the winter release. So, scoring and grading. What is it? So basically, Pardot scoring and grading provides an automated way to help qualify leads for, to decide whether they're actually worthy of your sales team's attention. They're best used in combination, so they can be sort of distinct tracts of information, but used together, they're very powerful. Scoring gives points to a prospect for the actions they take on your assets, like your website or emails, downloading brochures, things like that. And grading lets you define what your ideal customer looks like. So my little photo there is to say the scoring kind of decides, shows you someone's trying to give you flowers, and the grading lets you decide whether you want to accept them. There's a little note there. prior to setting up your scoring and grading models, we're assuming that you've already done some work around personas and defining your customer journeys within your particular business, because they all vary quite a bit. So on to scoring. So scoring basically measures implicit interest. It's not, it's just implied that if people are taking particular actions on your website or, on other assets, that kind of gives you some idea that what they're interested in. So, viewing a product page and downloading a product brochure and then attending a webinar about a product will give you a fairly good indication that someone's interested in that product. The theory behind scoring is pretty clear, but the thing that really makes it most effective is just having a clear content strategy that aligns really well to your sales funnel. So, everyone's funnels are different time frames, things like that. So the first thing you'd probably do is run a workshop with your key stakeholders, which typically would be your sales team, other marketing personnel, but the sales team probably really know the most about what your customers are looking at, the kind of actions they take on the website before they purchase a product. There's 3 streams here of which, the sort of typical marketing funnel type approach. Yep, so Tammy's just reminding us that sales buy-in is crucial. It's if you don't get them to agree with what you're doing, then it's not going to work. So anyway, the sort of 3 stages that we typically look at in a funnel is that the awareness, the consideration, and the decision, and each of those stages would attract different points that you can assign for actions taken at that stage of the journey. It actually requires, to do scoring really well, you do need quite a lot of content, and I guess that's the case always with any sort of content marketing. But in the workshop, you could look at all these different, I won't read out all the bullet points for you, but just put something like this together basically with your sales team, and score higher as they get further along the decision process. So Pardot actually comes with a default scoring model, and you can find that under the automation settings. They've already assigned basic points to different actions that are taken. So email opens, email clicks, things like that, form fills. Points are both added and subtracted using the scoring model. So in some cases, like the failure of filling in a form will actually subtract points from a prospect, and losing an opportunity will subtract points and things like that. If you change those scoring rules, Pardot will actually go through and rescore all the prospects. You can add and subtract scores from customers or prospects using completion actions, automations, engagement studio, page actions, dynamic links. So for instance, the default score for a form fill on your website might be 10 points, but if you've got a particular form that's special and related to a special campaign that you're running, you can earn, like, give people that fill that particular form in an additional 10 points, or whatever you decide. On top of that, a conditional completion action can add or subtract a score based on conditional criteria, and we did talk about conditional completion actions a couple of probably last forum. That's pretty cool. And in fact, the conditional completion actions can help you with just, I don't know, I always noticed how internal people always had the highest scores on our scoring model. So being able to subtract the points if they actually had their the business's domain name in their email address was kind of handy. Scores can also be influenced by a couple of different external systems. So if you've got a connection to Wistia Video and WebEx, that you can assign points from those systems. With the Wistia one, you can actually assign points if someone's watched 75% of your video. So that gives you a pretty good idea they're interested in whatever the video was about. The other thing that you can do is create scoring categories, and the scoring categories can be applied either for a product stream or a business unit. And the way that basically works is everything that's within a particular folder or content in a particular folder can be part of a scoring category, and so there it's you can assign a different score to the prospect just for that category. Once you've set up your scoring model, it's always worth reviewing and revising what you've put together after a couple of months to see if the scores that people are attracting actually align with the strength of them as a prospect or a potential sale. Once again, as I said earlier, if you go through and revise the scoring model, you will rescore the prospects. That's basically with the default scoring model. Some other things that it doesn't happen out of the box, but you need to set up some automations to subtract scores from people as the prospect ages, and if they're not taking as much activity over time, you might want to drop their score a bit and just degrade that. So because if they haven't been active recently, then obviously they're not as interested. And also scores can be reduced if an opportunity has been lost. So you're basically starting someone from scratch, because I guess if you've lost an opportunity for a sale, they may have bought elsewhere, or just are not interested. So those are the kinds of things that you would need to consider for scoring. Claudia.
Yeah, sorry, I just thought I want to add another idea. What you could consider is adding a field into your Salesforce and Pardot, which you might be calling MQL counter. So that, for example, if your score is 100 points and someone has reached the threshold of 100 points, you want to set them back to 0, inform the sales team that this lead has just made it, or the prospect has just made it to a marketing qualified lead. And at the same time, the MQL counter goes up by 1. So then you have an understanding of how many times that prospect might have reached the scoring threshold.
Yeah, that's
just
cool.
To add to that.
Yeah, I think maybe that wasn't very clear, Andy. One of the things that a lot of people go is, well, when is a good score a good score, and what is a good score? And that is so dependent on you as a business. But in my days when I was working with Salesforce, building scoring out in our organization, they just rattled off 100. So I used 100 as my score. And then when I was doing that sort of awareness, consideration, decisioning time, all my scores were smaller incremental amounts that, some good engagement would equal 100 points after a certain amount of time. Or like someone filling out one of those special forms that Andy mentioned, like one of those that is an immediate, this customer is hot, they're MQL, we need to get them out of here, that would just be 100 points on its own. So it would meet that criteria straight away. So yeah, how many points is a good point is really up to you as a business as to, like, you know, do you want to do small incremental pieces of scoring, or do you want to go in big numbers and score 10s, 20s, you know, 30s? Or so it's really up to you as to what is our number. There isn't a prescribed number out there, is probably the better way of sort of explaining it.
Yeah, so you almost have to reverse engineer some of that by taking a look at the people that you have sold something to recently, and just looking back to see what their journey looked like as well.
Or you know, when we were considering it at that point, we were looking at a particular product website page, and we had things that they could engage on all the way through the product page. But you know, when they were starting to get to the bottom of the page and there was a case study, you know, all that interaction at the beginning was those small incremental amounts. If they engaged with that case study, which was kind of coming to the end of the page, we were like, okay, they've come all the way down here. They're looking for proof that this is going to work. So that was quite a big score. And the moment they went and filled out the form, which was that last piece that they could find, like adding all those bits and pieces together meant that that person was well and truly engaged with that particular product. And we could then say, you know, that's our 100 score. So it was 20 for this, 80 for that. Or if it was if they went straight to the form and filled it at the bottom, there was 100 points straight away. So it was, it was just kind of working out a little bit of a recipe. As I said before to Andy and everyone, bring sales on your journey. Get them to buy into what does 100 points mean, and what has a customer done for 100 points that they know, okay, I'm not going to push back on this lead because this person's genuinely engaged with enough things to be pushed through for our attention.
Cool. Does anyone else have any questions about scoring at this point? If you do think of anything during the presentation, you can put it in the chat as well. So
when you're working on your model, get an Excel spreadsheet, start making a list of all those assets that you have, put them into their categories of where they are in that sort of sales cycle, and then start to associate like some scoring, some brief scoring. Just get your logic right in that sort of format, and then you use that as your sort of Bible, because as Andy explained, scoring isn't just a once-off, set it in the default scoring model and it works. It can be that way, but there's so many other incremental ways to adjust scoring as the team are building campaigns, that they can think of it from a campaign level as well as an always on level.
Actually, the other thing that I forgot to mention was things like if you can apply scores to page actions or dynamic links. So you might find that someone like they're having a look at around a lot of things, and they might have downloaded a couple of catalogs or white papers or things like that, and you think they're pretty interested, and then they go to the careers page, and that might tell you that they're actually preparing for a job interview or something like that, at which point you might want to drop their score again just for visiting that page. That's just something that you'll learn over time as well. Cool. All right, so we can move on to grading now. So grading is basically, as I just mentioned, the actions that a prospect takes on your site isn't necessarily as interesting if that person turns out to be a student doing research for an assignment, or potential employee preparing for an interview. So that's why we use grading, to kind of figure out if they look like the person that we want to sell to, or that we have been successful in selling to in the past. Once again, you have to get the sales team on board. Find out from them. They know what their ideal customer looks like. It could be related to where they live, the industry they're in, their title, potentially their income or the revenue turnover of the company they work for, all those sort of things. So you, once again, you can reverse engineer that to sort of say your most lucrative customers were mid-level managers at SMBs with a particular number of staff and an annual turnover of 40 million or something. And once again, like understanding how you want to grade your customers will also inform some of the information that you're going to ask for in forms and other ways. And Tammy can talk a little bit more about that later. Just the ways you can actually collect that data to help inform your grade, your each prospect's grade. Grading is actually, it's a little bit complicated, but once you get the hang of it, it's not so hard. You can use multiple profiles for grading, but I suggest you just start with one to begin with, and see how that works. The grades rank from F, which is obviously poor, to A+, which is really, really good. And grades can go up and down by a third of a letter grade. So that's like B-, B+. Each of those is a third. You can actually put so JavaScript on pages that assign profiles to particular customers. Usually there's a default profile that comes with Pardot, and everyone has that one assigned to them by default. But if you have a part of your website that's for a particular industry or something like that, you can have some JavaScript on the page that assigns them that particular industry profile, and they'll be graded against that particular profile rather than just the default one. So when prospects match criteria in their oh, sorry, I was just looking at the chat. When prospects match the criteria in their assigned profile, the grade increases by the amount specified in the profile. And if they don't match the criteria, their grade will decrease. So the grading profiles are used to differentiate between the different target audiences. And the way that you assign profiles is either manually, you can use a set profile completion action on a form or a form handler, an automation rule triggered by an event, e.g. if someone enters a particular job title on a form, you can trigger a profile change for that. And as I mentioned earlier, the JavaScript for the profile on your website sets the profile for visitors as well that aren't associated with any other profile. And once they convert, you'll already know that as I said earlier, if they went to part of the site that was for a particular industry, and they converted through a form or something, that you'd already have that information about which profile they should be assigned. So that's pretty helpful. So I'll take you through a bit of a profile example, grading profile. So my company Posts Galore sells scratching posts, but they don't sell lampposts. And just as an example, I'll use a default profile to grade our prospects. Both of my prospects start with a profile of a profile grade of D, and depending on the criteria they match, their grade will go up and down, as I've illustrated here. My criteria in this case is that, you know, they need to have certain kind of feet, they need to have certain kind of ears, certain kind of eyes, and a certain kind of voice. But obviously, if you were doing that in industry, you'd be looking at things like their job title and revenue and whatnot. But this is just an example to show you how when a criteria matches, the grade will go up based on the value you've assigned for that grade. So for feet, that's a really important one for me because, as I said earlier, I'm selling scratching posts. So my number one sort of upgrade is a prospect with sharp claws or claws, but someone with paws or hooves wouldn't have a use for what I'm selling. So would drop their grade by 1 if they don't match that criteria. So I've just done a little example to show you that a dog is not my ideal customer and a cat is. I'm not sure how clear this really is, but I'll go further. When you're setting up your default profile, you need to create potentially you need to create custom fields to grade your prospects. And in the criteria setup, that's where we tell Pardot how important each of the criteria is to our grading. So with the grade adjustments of 1 or 1/3 of a letter or 2/3. The default grading profile looks at company size, industry, location, job title, and department. But as every business is different, you'll know best what would suit your ideal customer. And as I mentioned earlier, you may need to be creating some custom fields in your org to sort of cover off those particular criteria that you want to score, grade against. I always use the terms interchangeably. Yep, so as I said earlier, in my criteria, matching feet gives you a full grade because that's what I'm selling. Once you've set up those criteria, there's a second step, which is to set up automations that go through the database and check out everyone's, you know, whether each prospect matches the criteria, and then puts them up or down a grade dependent on which of the criteria they're matching. So it's recommended that each criteria has its own automation rule, and it's probably a good idea to use some naming conventions when you're creating those rules, just so that you remember what they're for, because they do need to repeat, or you probably want them to repeat periodically just to scan your database and see if anyone's criteria has changed, and which will affect their grading. And you would set your rules to repeat monthly and allow unlimited matches. You also need to set up automation rules that's for prospects that don't match the criteria. So once again, then you put in the criteria values and the action taken. So it would be change profile criteria to feet does not match, and then the work gets done to downgrade that particular prospect. So once again, the grading, really you want to do it with your sales team because they know the customers best, you hope. So document what you know and your assumptions about your best customers. And just to start with, I would use a single profile and just test how that works against your database. And once you get more confident and comfortable with how it all works, you can start to break out into using other profiles for you know, different business arms that might, you know, be targeted at a different kind of prospect. So once you created all your criteria and your automations, you check that against some dummy prospects just to make sure that you're actually achieving like an A grade and a lesser grade with the grading that you've chosen, and document it all in Excel, and then review it, see how it's working, see if the grade actually matches the people that are end up buying from you, and review it, and maybe massage it so it really fits your business.
You'll know if it's not working. Sales will be pushing back and saying the quality of the leads are not good. And point number one is go and check the grading.
Yeah. And once again, as with scoring, changing the grading criteria will update existing prospects' grades. And if that all just sounds like it's too much hard work, there is Einstein behavior and lead scoring, which performs a pretty similar function. It does require a Pardot Advanced and Salesforce Enterprise Edition license and above. The data requirements for behavior scoring, which is behavior scoring is sort of the equivalent to the lead scoring, having 6 months of prospect engagement data and 20 prospects linked to opportunities is recommended. The lead scoring, so this is confusing, but lead scoring is actually more to do with grading. For that to work well, you need to have probably over 1,000 leads created in the last 6 months, and of those, 120 or so should have been converted to an account and a contact and an opportunity, just so that the Einstein actually has some data to work with and figure out what it can do for you. So the behavior scoring is similar to the what we called lead scoring before, scoring. It uncovers the most influential behavior signals across past and current prospect engagement. Einstein behavior scoring also decays over time automatically, which is something that Pardot doesn't do out of the box, and you do sort of have to, as I mentioned, probably create some automations to make that happen. But Einstein actually decays that over time, so which is a benefit. It looks at each prospect and each of their Pardot activities, and identifies which activities are positive signals and which are negative signals. So, you know, once again, maybe visiting page X about a particular product is a positive signal, whereas visiting the careers page is a negative signal. It's got a machine learning model that scores every prospect based on the likelihood they will convert, and assigns each prospect a score from 0 to 100 in relation to how they compare to all the other prospects in your database. So if your sales team hopefully are inundated with leads, that gives them a good idea on which ones they should focus on based on who's converted into a sale in the past or an opportunity. Einstein lead scoring is actually more like the grading. It scores the leads by how well they fit the company's successful conversion patterns. So once again, lets your sales team prioritize who they're giving their attention to. It looks at each of the leads and their field data, including custom fields, so standard and custom fields, and identifies field data characteristics that are positive signals, and which of them are negative. So even things like lead source might be a positive characteristic. And once again, trains a machine learning model and scores them based on the likelihood they will convert. Based on things like their title and where they've come from, and then assigns each lead a score from 0 to 100 in relation to how they compare with the other leads in your database. So that's two slightly easier and more hands-off ways of getting that same sort of information. So, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone want to add anything that I've missed? Tammy, Claudia?
No, I'll be showing a more simplistic view of tackling grading in the real world, not in the cats and dogs world.
Cool. Can you display the Einstein lead score in Pardot?
Yeah, so my knowledge is that Einstein scoring is actually built out in the CRM on the actual contact and lead pages and objects. And so the Einstein scoring is actually, it's a component. It's not actually a field. So you wouldn't be able to map it back into Pardot to see it in Pardot.
You could maybe with some custom development, but that's complicated. But no, it uses Pardot data. Yeah, but it's then made visible in on the CRM side.
NPL.
Another look at what does NPL stand for?
Sorry, Michael, where did you see the word NPL?
So I think Claudia mentioned the field that you create.
Oh, the MQL.
MQL.
Qualified lead field. Yes. Okay. Cool. MQL, marketing qualified lead.
I got two of them wrong. All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And yet, Pardot scoring and grading should be enabled as part of your implementation on the page layouts in the lead and contact object. They're just part of that surfacing up the Pardot data in the page layouts. So it's all there out of the box. You just have to surface it up.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Cool. All right. I'm looking at the time, and I know we've got Chris here to show us all the releases, and I still have to do something, so we might have to charge on and maybe stay a little bit later if the information is luring enough. But what I thought I'd do is I'd show you all just a quick example of how can you be clever with that grading and scoring and collecting enough information, because obviously the critical piece around getting the grading correct is having the data, right? And so we've worked with quite a lot of clients. In fact, we won a Power Dreaming Best in Show last year for this particular use case around the example is customer comes in, they're on our website, and all we do is we just capture them as a newsletter lead. They just come in, put in their email address in a very simple email field, and we've now got them as a prospect. Our main task is how can we very quickly reach out to that customer and get them to complete some more information about themselves that helps us grade them almost at the beginning of their journey with us. So we've come up with a concept where for example, let's say I've already filled in my form before, so you have my data, and that data will pre-display in the field, which is a built-in form. But the rest of this page is actually just a very cleverly designed page, which is a form. And as the customer is just clicking on all the little different bits and pieces that fulfill where they are, and this is particular property. So what we did is we went to sales and we said to sales, if you had to call one property client today and know that if you collected X amount of information from that customer, they would be the right customer to talk to, what is that information? And so things in the property world are like, you know, where are you in your property buying cycle? Have you got your finance approved, or are you seeking it, or because people who at a different stage in terms of their financing are at different stages in terms of if they're ready to buy or not. And so we know people who have finance approved, for example, are people that are more hot than someone who's still saving, who might need to be put on a nurture, for example, and nurtured until such time as maybe their profile improves and they now get to a finance approved stage. Also the same with like, what is your timeline to purchase? So if I'm clicking on now, I'm way more hot than someone who might be looking in 12 months. So the kind of questions that you can ask are all what we call data enrichment questions, but these are the questions that then will underpin that. Are you, what does your grade need to look like? Because based on the answers you've given us, we might jump you up a whole letter for now, but maybe only put you up a third of a letter for in 12 months' time. Same with finance approved, we'd jump you a whole letter now versus still saving, we might just put you up a third of a letter. So these questions and these answers have all been rated and weighted based on that whole jumping a letter, one whole letter, or 2/3 of a letter, or 3/3 of a letter. And so as the customer's working through this, as they're clicking, they're just telling you everything about themselves without actually having to fill out a form. And when they submit that, all that data is actually going into Pardot. We've then obviously set up automation rules. So the automation rules are all here that are saying, now one of the things that Andy didn't mention, and I guess where she was talking about keep things simple with grading, remember, the more complexity you bring into your grading and profiling, the more automation rules you're going to use to write the triggers and the constant sort of looking for people who matching criteria. And for some of you might be on a growth or a plus Pardot, which is most of the audiences in Australia that we work with are either a growth or plus. And so you'd land up running out of automation rules because you know that there's a limit of automation rules in the system. So, just remember, simple is better when it comes to grading. It means you're going to have, this one's got 18 automation rules that support that one landing page. Just to show you, we've done something very similar from a finance perspective in the financial industry. What are the things that people are asking customers before they engage with them? And people can then obviously tick on these tick boxes, and they're fulfilling their all the data that we need to know about them to actually work out is this person a really good client for us? Now, what we've done is we've said to Pardot, if someone submits this whole form or this whole landing page and their grading criteria sits between a B- and an A+, this customer is an what's a marketing qualified lead. So in Pardot's world, that's the point where we tell Pardot, take this person, send them across to Salesforce so that the sales team can pick up this as a lead and then action it and then hopefully follow the sales cycle through. Very simple use case, very simple example, but it works. We had a customer who increased their sales by 34% by putting something like very basic like this in place, that then just got those leads through the door and was able to convert them. And so you can see here there was a couple of questions earlier on about, does this record, what was her name, Julie? What does it look like? Here it shows you in Pardot, here's the score and the grade here for this particular person. But if I go into Salesforce, it'll show me, and I'll show you where it is, Veet. That exact data will be sitting inside the lead and contact record of this person. So yeah. So that's a little bit more. I just thought I'd quickly show you in 5 minutes what that could look like. Letting the page layout open. So you'll see what we've done here is we've actually surfaced the grade right up into that first ribbon. That's not how it looks out of the box. But if you scroll down, you can see the Pardot activity section. And in that section, these are fields that are all out of the box that just need to be opened up and surfaced up in the CRM. So suddenly you've got your score and you've got your grade sitting there on that lead object inside CRM. Cool. That's me. I'm going to hand it back to Chris and let her take you through some of the winter release notes and what's coming in the next few months.
Thank you, Tammy and Andy. Hi, everyone. I'll now take you through the winter release notes and some of the new features for Marketing Cloud account engagement. So depending on your Salesforce instance, the releases will arrive for you either early September or early October this year. So first off, external actions. As part of the extensibility enhancements, you can now take actions on prospects outside of account engagement. You can take your Engagement Studio programs to the next level by automatically registering prospects for a webinar, or sending them an SMS text, or even creating a new lead or opportunity in Salesforce. For those new to external activities, they are related to a marketing app extension, which connects Pardot to external platforms using the Pardot API. External actions can be used independently. For instance, you just want the action to be applied to a prospect or tapping into a third-party platform's functionality. Next slide, please. Yep, so where does this change apply to? This change applies to Account Engagement Lightning app in Plus, Advanced, and Premium editions. And how do you apply this feature? For each third-party app used to interact with prospects, set up a marketing app extension and work with your developer to create the invocable action that fits your use case. Then add an action type to your marketing app extension. You will now be able to use the action in Engagement Studio as shown in the image on the right.
Very, very exciting. I got very excited by this. So one of the key things that happens in the world of Pardot and CRM is often customers say that they don't create opportunities when they convert leads across to contacts and accounts. And what that does is it pretty much breaks how Pardot's been built, because without the opportunity and the opportunity value, Pardot can't actually look to the campaign and say, okay, this person was on the campaign. There was an opportunity created off the back of them being on that campaign for X amount of dollars, and that converted, which was then able to do this kind of little triangular ROI kind of maths. And now, I mean, you can imagine if a client chooses not to use opportunities, we could help craft opportunities in the background that are just helping the marketing team to be able to at least record someone was on a campaign and an opportunity was created off the back of that. So very exciting stuff.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Pausing prospect activity tracking. We've all experienced this. Prospect records that rack up activity. This in turn unintentionally triggers automated actions such as automation rules, Engagement Studio actions, or emails which have the potential to fire based on a prospect's score threshold. So this bot-like activity is challenging to control once it starts. Now you can pause activity tracking for prospects with an excessive amount of activity, usually in the thousands. So when a prospect's activity tracking is paused, an icon appears on the prospect's list view and an error appears on the prospect record. Another point to take note is that paused prospects who are opted in can still receive marketing emails.
Yeah. I guess for me, this was highlighted again, and I think it's, again, if I had to do my life over and be a marketing manager working in Pardot, having the time and setting aside the time, or having someone specifically dedicated to analyzing the data in the system and taking that time is so important, because this kind of you will only be able to do this if you actually sort of looking at your prospect database on a weekly, monthly basis, filtering it, working out who's very highly scored, looking for nuances and gaps, and actually doing all the analysis. If you don't do this analysis, these kind of features just are not going to be something that you'd focus on.
Okay, so prospect database full sync. So Pardot admins can now run full sync on your prospect database. This will be possible every 7 days when there are less than 500,000 prospects by business unit. So while the frequency and number of records are limited, this is still a big win for Pardot admins. If you've been working with Pardot extensively, you will know that the ways to currently trigger mass prospect sync are not ideal, such as exporting existing prospect records with their IDs and then mass importing them with the same file with the IDs mapped. Now you'll find a new connector setting called sync all prospects.
Or writing automation rules to add 1 point and then reverse the 1 point. that was our trick. We called it the force throttle.
What you also might want to consider or think about it, that is like, now that Pardot has an immediate sync or a 2 to 4 minute sync with a lead and contact objects, but it doesn't have the same like syncing regularity with an account object, an opportunity object, or a custom object. That takes a bit longer actually, like it can take up to a few hours. So if you're creating a new field, or if you're saying, oh, I'd like to segment my database by this account field, and you're mapping the account field into Pardot, and straight off the back, you're building your dynamic list by that field, and you wonder why that list is empty, it's because the data hasn't synced so quick across from that field you've just mapped newly in your Pardot account. So for that purpose, it's also great that you can just quickly sync your entire database to ensure that the field is up to date immediately.
Thank you, Claudia. Next, control prospect opt-out field sync behavior. So for something as serious as prospect opt-out, you don't want the sync reverting the prospect's choice back to its previous state. For example, if a prospect opts out using the email unsubscribe link and a Salesforce user updates their associated lead or contact record before the connector sync completes, the prospect would unintentionally be opted back in. So now with a designated system of record, you must choose either use Pardot's value or use Salesforce value. Use the most recently updated record is no longer an option for this field.
Yeah, I think we spoke about this morning. This is definitely something that you have to think about very, very carefully. And I think as a team, we're going to sit and try and unpack this a little bit more. Yeah, because, you know, in most cases, everyone says use Salesforce as your master of truth, and opt-out is kind of a global opt-out in Salesforce. But yeah, we are... without having most recently updated record, that's thrown a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons. And so we have, as a team, said we've got to research this and actually work out what's a good sort of generic way of building this out to make sure that we're doing the right thing by the clients.
Yeah,
and
I guess
like you're compliant, I suppose.
Yeah, just some thoughts. If you're thinking about that now, what we had this morning when we talked about it is it potentially makes sense to make Pardot the master here, because we want to use the email preference pages for people to opt in and out from there. So that's why in this instance, it would make sense for Pardot. But what if you have the person ringing you and saying, I don't want to receive your emails anymore, opt me out. And it was so nice, and you could just tick the box in Salesforce opt out, and it would sync across to Pardot, which wouldn't then be the case anymore, right? So either way, you could consider create a Pardot template ready to go with preferences, and train your sales team and saying if anyone receives that email receives that phone call, to send that email on a one-on-one basis to that particular person, so they have to click the link and opt them out themselves. Or you could consider there's a do not email field as well in Pardot, which could be custom mapped into Salesforce, and that could be used instead. But that needs more unpacking. Yeah.
And Claudia, you can also, because you could write a similar email, you know, when the whole GDPR thing came in, sometimes someone might verbally agree to be added to a marketing list, and the salesperson would put them on, sending an email to just get them to confirm what they actually want to receive as well. Make sure that everything just gets processed through Pardot all the time.
And lastly, licensing. Pardot-only logins were retired back in 2021. From that day onwards, if users didn't have a full CRM license, they would need to be assigned a Salesforce identity license. So these special licenses have the sole purpose of enabling single sign-on to users who still has access to account engagement. So with this view, dedicated permission set license and permission set, it grants users access to most of the marketing tools available in the account engagement Lightning app, as opposed to the standalone Pardot app, but doesn't allow full access to campaigns in Salesforce. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice one. If any of you are not what's the word, fortuitous enough to have been given a full Salesforce license by your company and you're in a marketing function, I think it did sort of tie people's hands a little bit when those identity licenses were released, because you could only access Pardot Classic, and now you can access Lightning, which is great. And I believe you can see the campaign object, still can't access it, which would be the Northern Star, is if the marketing people could have access to the campaign object and Pardot, much better solution. But yeah, it's getting there. It's a much, yeah. Some burning questions. So Rebecca, great idea in terms of, that custom field. I guess, we were also saying we could use that do not email field as well, and make sure that that's mapped across into CRM, and then make sure we're doing the smarts with all of that through automation rules. Cool. And then Malcolm, the question around like the sync time between Pardot and CRM is, it then needs to be a trigger that instigates a sync, and a trigger is a change in information on a field. So, as long as that change of information is done and saved, that's the trigger. And then that trigger is what sort of causes that 2 to 4 minute sync time between Pardot and the lead and contact records. So yeah, on the opt-out, sort of if we talk about the opting out and how much time you have to work between the two systems, yeah, you don't have a lot of time if that's what you're chasing.
All right, we're on 5:31 now, so probably everyone's in a hurry to end their day. We just got a quick poll that we wanted to ask you whether you're interested in attending a Dreamforce wrap-up, and I said in November there, but I think actually it's October that we're aiming for, so I've just popped a quick poll up in the chat, I think. Can someone verify that that's
it's
available?
there. The poll's been started, so if anyone
So please, just before you leave the meeting, let us know if you're interested in an in-person event. We did also have an idea about doing a Jamboard for getting some ideas for topics, but
I would put the link in the chat for those that are happy to stand. Claudia's done it. For those that are happy to stay around for another 2 minutes, if there's anything really pressing, a topic that you would love to be covered in these sessions, please shout. We would love to hear what people are some burning topics that people would love to hear about, because we just suck these topics out of our thumbs and go, this might be good.
Yeah.
It would be absolutely way better if you could inform us of the kind of topics that you'd be looking to hear about.